Welcome to the Female Finance Collective, where we encourage women to have open and honest conversations about all things money. In today's episode, we're going to chat about ways to save money while you're traveling.
And I think one of the things we all share is a love for travel and to be financially mindful when it comes to travel. One of the important things is to start with some research. And the way that I do this is I brainstorm places that I would like to travel. I think of the time frame. So, if I'm looking to go to Italy next year, I'll start to plan for that well ahead of time. And I also include things like weekends away. So any kind of travel that would impact your budget. And then I start to do the research to get a very clear understanding of what the trip would cost. So I look into flights, hotels versus Airbnbs, and just all the other incidental costs that we often forget about. So even the airport transportation to get to and from your destination, how much you might spend on eating out. If you need clothing to go to a specific destination, then I factor that in as well. And then I also start to think about entertainment, activities, and where I would love to splurge. So for me, I like to stay in nicer hotels. I have a bigger budget to accommodate that. And then there's other areas where I don't mind cutting back. So I don't, for breakfast, I love to have coffee and something small. So I'm willing to cut back on spending in some of those areas. So just every trip and every plan starts with research and figuring out what pricing looks like. And Jen, what is it that you do when it comes to planning trips? How do you think about the financial piece?
Well, like you said, there are so many aspects to think about, right? But what I love about travel and all the aspects is you can pick and choose where you save, right? So we have I know that all of us I think have points credit cards that we use for traveling. So we have an airline card and a hotel card. I use the hotel card all the time. My husband uses the airline card all the time. So then when we travel, we try to purchase our rooms or tickets, airline tickets. I couldn't get that word to come out. I was like, rooms aren't on airplanes. We try to purchase at least one of those with points so that we're saving the money from for half, because those are the two biggest expenses. I feel like if you're on a longer trip, then obviously food and that type of thing starts to add up. But 7 nights of hotel or 5 nights of hotel really can add up a lot. So we try really hard to use points for at least parts of that. And that's a really good way to save. And there are a ton of travel cards out there. We stay with a hotel chain specific and an airline specific, but I know people use all kinds of cards that can apply to different tips. I know there are people who love to go to Disney. They love those Disney cards that I was just with a friend yesterday and she was like, I'm paying with my Disney card because I'm racking up my points. She was being really strategic. So that is I would say that's the way we save the most money, is by booking our travel, looking at specific hotels and using the same airline every time, because those miles really do add up and those points end up saving us quite a bit of money. So that's kind of our biggest thing. Sybil, do you have one place that you save the most when you're planning?
Yeah, I would say mine is credit cards as well. So we really like the Chase credit cards. We have the Chase Sapphire Reserve and the Chase Freedom Unlimited. And the beautiful thing about them is they work together. You can merge your points together. And if you use it on travel, you get more value for each point, right? And so actually during COVID, we kind of stopped that because we were like, we need to book directly through the through the airline company, for example, or through the hotel, because, it was hard to cancel and all that. But we've gotten back to kind of that routine. And those two cards really, travel is their thing, right? Like they have, you can do it for dining, you can do it for other things, but the biggest bonus is with travel. And then we also try to hack very strategically, because credit score is really important and we both have excellent credit scores, but we also are strategically sign up under each other's credit cards for the bonuses, right? So we flew to Fiji a year ago. Oh my gosh, it was a year ago. It was amazing. And I was going for work, and so my flight was covered. But what we did is we opened Chase Sapphire Reserve under my husband's name off of mine. And so I got bonus points. He got bonus points, and his flight to Fiji, $1,500 flight, ended up being free by doing that, right? And then now we monitor, like, how long are we to keep both of them open? Will we close mine? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of strategy and things you can do with the credit cards as well. And so I really try to do that well. And I would just put out the word of caution with credit cards. I know myself well, and I pay them off every month, and it's not for everybody, for sure. Credit cards, actually, the science tells us we end up spending more on credit cards than we would if we were using cash, right? So you really have to wage all of that. But for us, the credit cards have done us very well with saving and travel. And then what I do is we try to be open about, like, where we might travel to when we can. Obviously, this is like an open vacation. And then I start looking at those hotel prices and those airline prices. Like you said, Jen, those are the two biggest expenses typically. And then we start to let that also help us decide where we might want to go. Also, is it a direct flight, or is there a lot of travel time with layovers, right? That ends up costing you more money, because all of a sudden you're at the next airport for 2 or 3 hours. You need to get some lunch, right? Like, sometimes the longer travel can cost you more money too than if you can get somewhere more direct. From Denver, we went to Puerto Vallarta last spring break, and we were like, this is amazing, it's a direct flight. And so we were at our house to, our Airbnb there within, a short period of time. And so that saved us a lot of money that we didn't spend on that long travel day if we'd gone somewhere further and had a layover and things like that. So yeah, I'd say my biggest thing is, like, paying attention to those flights and those hotels or Airbnbs. How much is that going to cost when you can? And then helping that lead some of your conversations or discussions about money and how much it's going to cost you. And then we think about location. Like, where do we want to stay? We, number one, think about being close to what we want to visit, right? Because then that cuts down on your transportation costs. That cuts down on usually dining costs, because we always see if there's a grocery store nearby. We're big Airbnbers for the most part. So is there a grocery store to get groceries nearby? Is there restaurants to go to nearby? So really thinking about the location of where you're staying helps with costs a lot as well.
That's such a good point about location. I find that we tend to do a lot of travel just on the shoulder season. So just when prices are a little bit better, and outside of major holidays where a lot of people are traveling, you can have the same experience, but it's at a much lower cost. And we do the same. We tend to self-cater as much as possible and look for more local restaurants versus some of the touristy spots, depending where you're traveling. Like when we went to Italy, there was a huge difference between pricing at the tourist restaurants versus the smaller local restaurants, where the meals were just as memorable, but just so much cheaper. I also use credit cards and convert to Aeroplan points. So I'm in Canada, I use the Amex Cobalt. We do all our grocery shopping on that card, and that usually gives us kind of 2 to 4 flights a year just off of grocery purchases. But the important thing is to pay your statement balance so that you're not paying interest. And that's actually one of the best strategies for travel planning, is to know your budget for the next year or the next 2 years and strategically put money away into a designated savings account so that when your trip comes, you have the money. It is just so much nicer to go on vacation without a bill at the end of it. And there is actually science that tells you that when you can delay gratification, you're just really looking forward to the trip, because the exciting part of the trip is often the anticipation, planning what you're going to do, envisioning yourself on that trip. And that is such a great part of travel, is the excitement of, what you will get to experience. And combining that with that regular savings helps to make sure that your finances stay on side and you have a money stress-free vacation.
I love the tip of saving money in a separate account. I've shared with people before that there is like no harm in opening multiple savings accounts and designating this one for, house savings. This one is for travel savings. But I find it motivating for me when I can see the number going up. So if you are saving in advance for a trip, and you see like, oh my gosh, now I'm at $560. Ooh, if I skip this meal out today, I can make it $575. Like, that becomes motivating for me. And I know not for everybody, but for some people, to like, if you have that balance separate, it's easier to kind of watch that grow, which I think, like you were saying, Marilee, helps with the anticipation. So we've talked about ways to save when you're getting there. Not all of them. We've talked about ways to like kind of get it covered for you, right? We've talked about researching and thinking about the off times to travel to different places. And part of that research is you can just Google, like, where's the cheapest place to travel in October or whatever? Where are really good travel deals in this time? Because there are certain places that are off season at different times than others. And so I've recently, we really want to go on a trip, but we have all these like small things planned and going on. So I've just been pretend planning a trip that we're not probably going to go on. So I was Googling like, when's the cheapest time to do this? Or like, when's a good time? So like, I know cruising isn't for everybody, but I was like, we're drivable to a cruise port. So I was like, where is like, how much would it cost to like take like a 3 or 4 day cruise to like down to Mexico or something? And it was saying that the cheapest time to buy those cruises is September and October, and that you can get them sometimes for $300 and $400 a person for these like 3 and 4 night things. And I was like, well, that's a great deal, especially if you can drive to the port, right? It's a great little way to get a little trip in. So, I mean, Googling like what is out there, there are so many more options out there than any of us can even wrap our mind around, right? So I really think that's a good trick to like learning more. And then what do you guys think about, I mean, I know Marilee, you said you love a nice hotel. We have a friend, I might have shared this on this podcast before. We have a friend who says, if I can't stay in a place nicer than my house, why am I going? Right? Like, why? What is the point? We also enjoy a nice hotel. Sometimes we'll sacrifice that if we know where we're going, we're never going to be in our room except for to like sleep. We'll put less value on the hotel. But do you guys, what about like Airbnbs? What is the benefit of that? I know some people love them and some people are hesitant to stay in those. What do you guys think the benefits of that are, and how are they saving money?
I definitely am a huge Airbnb. We really became that way with the kids. It became, as they got older, like really hard to do the hotel room thing. And then we would have to get 2 hotel rooms, right? So for us, that's where we kind of got into the Airbnb gig. I was going to say too, on Googling, something I put into when I'm Googling like research, I put in blog at the end, because what I like to hear is what people's experiences are in the place I'm traveling to. And then I find out which neighborhoods I might want to stay in. So an advantage of Airbnbs versus hotels is sometimes there's not hotels in the quirky, fun little graffiti area, for example. So that's a reason I like Airbnb too. And I find that people kind of vlogging or blogging about their travels. And I find that helps me save money as well. Because a lot of the people that blog out there, not all, but maybe the ones I follow, are more of those budget traveler kind of people. But I think Airbnbs for us have saved us a lot of money because we're a family of 4, number one. And number 2, just doing our own at least breakfast and lunch, right? And even if we just do a couple dinners of our own, at the Airbnb. That saves us so a lot in dining costs. And then also having the refrigerator. So if you do like a hotel, when we do hotels, we try to like get places with a mini bar or refrigerator that we could use as our refrigerator. Again, for some of those food things that we don't need to, you know, spend more money on. I also like to bring like a bottle of wine with me, whether I'm in a hotel or an Airbnb, you know, try to bring some stuff with you. Two of us are gluten-free in our family. So again, it's easier to bring, you know, some things with us. I take granola and almond milk, for example, when I travel for consulting. Even though they have a breakfast, it works for me to have that. But I think Airbnbs get you into the experience, which is why I travel. I want to experience culture. I want to experience what life is like there, the people. And so I feel I can really get in with the experience a bit more with Airbnb than hotels sometimes. But they obviously don't have the services that hotels have, right? But even like when we went to Puerto Vallarta, for example, we did half and half. We did 3 nights in an all-inclusive, so the kids and we could have that experience. And then we did 3 nights at an Airbnb. So sometimes we'll do that too. That way we get to kind of experience both. Also, we're big campers and we'd love to do hotels after camping. Because then it's like you're all dirty and it's like, oh, this hotel feels so amazing, you know. So that's kind of like my take on Airbnbs versus hotels. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I tend to, we do a lot of hotels. And for hotels, there's some of the similar hacks. Like we like to make sure that there is a fridge. If there isn't, we'll ask them to bring one. Most hotels will do that, no problem. So that you can have some drinks or snacks that you're not having to go to a restaurant. For Airbnbs, I agree. When you have kids, it's much more comfortable so that you don't have to get adjoining rooms or sleep in the same room together. And the other nice thing that we found helpful with Airbnbs is we ski, and it's helpful to have laundry because you're able to, you know, wash your clothes. That way you can pack a little bit lighter, which is helpful if you're traveling with a lot of family members. With Airbnbs, it's also easier to split with friends or family, so you can all save because you're splitting the cost of the nightly stay amongst more people. Sometimes we'll have friends pop over for a night or two, and we don't charge them anything, but they'll bring the items for dinner and cook dinner or do something like that. So definitely Airbnbs can be a great savings because of food. We've had great experiences. There's been 2 times where it was very tricky to find the Airbnb. So that's the one caution. If you're going to a place that you're not super familiar with, just understand where it's located, get really clear, realize that sometimes you might not have cell phone reception or you might not want to roam and pay for the daily rate. So just getting really clear on where they are. And then the other important thing is cancellation policies. So when can you cancel until or change? We tend to book about a year ahead for certain destinations because there is a savings for booking ahead, but we still like to look for options that are cancelable or changeable if our plans get revised.
That cancellation policy on Airbnb is key. Looking for when that date is, because it is true that you can sometimes find something cheaper or something even better comes up or opens up, somebody else canceled, and then you're able to kind of switch it around. And I think that's a really good tip when you're booking to like check that date. And it's always listed there, whether you're on Vrbo or Airbnb or any of them, they all list that cancel by date, which is really nice. All right, so we have talked about ways to save for hotels and lodging just in general, right? And airlines, like there are windows where it's cheaper to buy tickets than others. Sometimes they are accurate and it works, and sometimes the prices never go down or they're just surprising down. I like to check all the time and then see when it feels like a good price. And sometimes you can even call the airline and say, hey, this ticket went way down. Like sometimes they'll fix that for you. We've done it a couple times, but usually we don't even look again, and I don't want to know that I could have saved more money. But we've talked about the points for that. So then when you're on the trip, aside from like preparing meals in your where you're staying, or if the hotel happens to offer free breakfast and that's something that you can take advantage of, I think that's a great way to save. Some other meal saving things we try to do is, and I think Marilee, you might have mentioned this as well, but we'll try to find somewhere for breakfast that's like small, like a little coffee shop. We'll get like a breakfast sandwich and a coffee that's fairly inexpensive. We'll find some less expensive places for lunch. When we were just recently away for the weekend, we were trying to eat brunch so that we were only eating 2 meals a day instead of 3. I was like, wait, if we don't go to breakfast until 10:30, then we can eat kind of an early-ish dinner and we'll only need to eat twice. And so we've also kind of done that and strategized how to only eat twice or just get a little snack in the middle of the day. What are some other like, let's give some like, while you're there, what are some ways to save? So my favorite one that we just recently have started to be better about is if where we are offers public transportation, utilizing that versus ride shares and taxis. We saved, I mean, at least $100, maybe $200 when we were in Chicago a couple weekends ago, because we took the L everywhere. We took it from the airport to our hotel. We took it to a baseball game instead of Ubering, which sometimes it's so easy. You think, oh, I'll just grab my phone and the car will come. But we also just walked 2 blocks and got on the train. It was really easy and we saved a ton of money. So what are some like, when you're on the trip, here's some quick little things you can do that actually end up saving you a fair amount of money?
Another one is if you do need a rental car, is being strategic about when you need that rental car, because some places charge for parking too.
Mhm.
So the last thing you want to do is pay for the rental car and pay for the parking. If you know that part of your trip, you don't need that, right? So we do try to plan sometimes our trips around, like we're going to go here first and then here, so we don't need to get the car till this date. Is it cheaper to get the car at the airport still, or is it better because I'm already in town to get the car here, right? So you're kind of thinking about the expense on a rental car, for example, if you need it, and then how that's going to work out. Maybe it's better to Uber to get to that rental car, or Uber from this one location to this location, and then you pick up the car in that second location, right? But like you said, Jen, public transportation is always even cheaper than Uber. And another one that comes to mind is cell phone SIM cards. If you're traveling international, we don't personally pay for the international US plan. We just pop in a new SIM in the country we're in. So almost all countries have like a 7-day tourist SIM. And we found that to be a big cost saver versus an international plan or turning on international on our cell phones here as well.
Yeah, I have a couple of ideas as well. One of them is to look for free or low cost activities wherever you're traveling. So usually that's easy with a Google search, or just asking people, if you're dining at restaurants, asking some of the people that live locally for some ideas on great spots to visit. It's interesting because some of the tourist attractions can be so busy that it's also realizing that you may not be able to see everything that is on your list, and just knowing your priorities, and which is great for your schedule and also your wallet. If you're taking money out in different countries, it's just understanding what the fees are to take money out of the bank machine. We learned that in Italy, where it gives you the option to convert, and it was actually a really terrible rate. So there was a specific way that you had to take money out. And it's just being also mindful of conversion fees for all of your purchases and weighing the decision between using cash or credit cards. It's a tough one. I lean to credit cards for most of it, because it's just easier to have that track record and to see the charges. But we do use some cash as well for certain expenses. Some countries you need to have more cash because they don't always take credit cards. So just being mindful of all of those things. And the other area that I save is on souvenirs. I tend to not buy them very often. If I do, it's usually something specific, like it might be, something I can't get at home, or something that's like, coffee or something that I want to enjoy later. But I don't tend to buy souvenirs just to have something, because they are usually lower quality items and kind of highly priced for what they are. So that would be the other tip on.
That's funny you brought up souvenirs. You just reminded me. So one thing we do is we try to buy a Christmas ornament from where we travel to. And if we can't find a Christmas ornament, we buy a keychain, a Christmas tree ornament. We buy a keychain. And so we have keychains on our Christmas tree, or we like change, take off the ring and stuff. And then or we try to buy a magnet. And we found that though both of those are low cost, right? You can get them easily and they're super fun to like look at. Each Christmas, we're like, oh, going through all of our travels, right? And our magnets are on the side of the fridge. So I love that you brought up souvenirs. Also, one funny story real quick is like, I also didn't, when the kids were little and we're traveling to these most amazing places, I was like, they'd have the hardest time of picking stuff or they'd pick junk and so I remember this one time we were in Harbin, China, I think, and we went and saw like tigers and stuff, like in this like safari kind of zoo thing. And we told our kids, you guys can order the stuffed animal you want on Taobao, which was like the big like Amazon in China. And so they got their souvenirs delivered to them when we got home. But it still works. Like they were like years later, like that's my tiger from Harbin China trip. We just didn't buy it there.
But that's a good point, because sometimes like people will buy things like wine in Italy, and when they ship it to your home country, there's a lot of duty to pay. And so it's an unexpected expense that comes up. So just being clear, if you're shipping something home, get like the true cost of it. The other thing I forgot to mention is packing. There's a lot of baggage fees and extra costs for overpacking or bringing multiple suitcases. So we tend to travel really, really light, and just, not overpack clothing or toiletries or things like that, so that we don't have to pay any extra fees there.
That's a good one, because sometimes airlines can really also, when you're booking your flight, make sure that you're booking with an airline that isn't going to like charge you for a carry-on, charge you for whatever. Like sometimes the ticket feels like, whoa, this price is amazing. And then you realize, oh, just to carry on like even your purse, you're going to have to pay like $35. So, watch for all of those fees and just read really carefully. And like you can search also really quickly, does this airline for carry-ons? Like just putting in the time to really plan your trip thoughtfully is a huge way to save money. And also just make sure that your trip is a success, because you know more of what's going on, you're more confident in everything. I think that was kind of the key of every tip, right? Like look for the free and low cost activities. That takes a little bit of time on the front end, but then you're going to already know what you want to do. You're going to have a good time. You're not going to be stressed when you're there. Like, what are we going to do today? Oh no, those tickets were so expensive. Really kind of knowing some of that stuff ahead, I think not only saves you money, but it saves you stress when you're there. I'm a huge planner, and like we have this whole itinerary, and sometimes the itinerary says nothing. There's like a big gap for 4 hours because maybe there's something cool that we've discovered when we're there. But we really try to have a pretty planned out itinerary before we go, so that we can be thoughtful ahead about how much things are going to cost, and then where we can kind of cut back if we start to look and we're like, oh, that's really starting to add up. How can we kind of rein it in? And the same with restaurants. I look up all kinds of restaurants before we go, because I want to eat, kind of Marilee, you were saying this too. I do not want to eat at those overpriced, not good tourist trappy restaurants. Like we want to eat at the good, interesting places that the locals are going. Like we went to this bagel shop in Chicago that I had found online, and we were in line with people with their baby strollers in their pajamas. And I was like, we found the place, because these people are coming here in their pajamas on a Saturday morning. We know this is it. And so that was much cheaper to go to this really cute, fun bagel shop than, you know, some sit down breakfasty place that would have cost us probably 2 or 3 times the price. So doing research ahead of time is not only can be fun because it gets you excited, like you were saying, for your trip, but also can save you a ton of money in the end. So I think we're going to wrap this up. We've shared a ton of stuff for international and like domestic travel, no matter what kind you're doing. And obviously, we cannot talk about all the kinds of travel and all the ways to save in like a short period of time because people write whole books on this, right? And so, but if you have any questions, please feel free to leave us comments on social media or in the feedback for this episode, and we're happy to like do another episode and answer questions that people have. So thank you again for listening. Please be sure to like and follow our podcast, and you can find us on Instagram and YouTube at Female Finance Collective. And again, like I said, we'd love to hear from you. So don't hesitate to send us your questions and your topic ideas, and we look forward to chatting with you next week.